Welcome Carter and Jared Spahn to episode number 34 of the Path to Follow podcast. Thank you guys so much for coming in. This is the first 3 people on the same podcast episode, first father-son episode. So I'm really excited to try to figure out how this works and how to talk to both of you guys at the same time and get your stories and hear more about your connection with Gilman today. So thanks very much.
Yeah, Carter's mom's been trying to do the same thing for the past 17 years. So.
That's a fair point.
So Jared, maybe we can start out with you a little bit and talk to you about your experience at Gilman. And I know Gilman means a lot to you. You're one of the first people who really reached out to me after watching one of the episodes. I think it was Justin Baker's episode when we were talking about meditation, and you were like, how do we get Carter into some meditation? I tried to bring it up in class a couple times, but I'm not sure if you've gotten there yet, Carter. Trying it out a little bit.
Yeah, I know I need to. It's just like, I don't know, I've been busy. I haven't had time. But
yeah, got to make some time there.
Yeah, I should. It's definitely, I read up a lot about it, and it seems like a very worthwhile thing to do. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it has helped me a lot, just especially now with always the screen in our faces all day long, just to get away, whether it's sitting in a quiet room or taking a walk. It's almost necessary at this point, because I'm sure you have some screen fatigue being in front of that thing all day.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I bought some blue light glasses. I don't know if you know what those are.
Yep.
To help me out. My eyes are hurting. So it's definitely need a break.
Yeah. Are those doing much for you?
They actually do. They work like surprisingly well. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like just getting out of your chair and taking time off the screen is important. It's something that I definitely need to improve on, I think, as he'll tell you. But
yeah, he also said that you have the music going while you're doing your homework. He was like,
yeah, I'm always someone that is like multitasking, and so I have like a 2-monitor setup. So when I was in 9th grade, I built my own computer, my own desktop, and so I have like a 2-monitor setup. I always have one thing on one monitor, one thing on the other, which is a little bit ridiculous, but I don't know, that's just how I work.
It's efficient though. I mean, I have a monitor too, and I didn't have one last year, and it's a game changer because I don't know, just looking at the tiny laptop screen it's straining on you a little bit, and then having, something else to move your head around a little bit. I don't know. It makes a little bit of a difference, I would say.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice thing to have.
So Jared, thank you for that email, by the way. I appreciate you watching the podcast and
I've watched
commenting.
a bunch of them.
Yeah.
They've been awesome. They've been really good.
Well, it's been a lot of fun to talk to our teachers and coaches and, as you said, people in Carter's life on these episodes. But maybe we can start out with you and thinking back to your time as a student at Gilman. What types of things were you involved with here, and maybe what memories maybe come to mind about this place?
Wow, there's a lot. And I think I would take up the whole episode if I tried to go through everything. But I came here as a 9th grader and never really knowing that Gilman even existed. My father had gone to Boys Latin, and when I was in middle school, he said, maybe you'd like to go to private school for high school. And I only knew that there were 3 private schools in the entire world. I knew Boys Latin from him. There were some kids in my neighborhood. I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, who went to McDonough. And then there was a school out there, Glen Out Country School. And my dad said, well, we've got 1 or 2 other schools I'm going to have you take a look at. And one is Gilman. And I instantly fell in love with it the moment I stepped on campus. In fact, it was the only school I even applied to. If I had known how difficult it was, I think I would have, maybe applied to some other schools. But I stepped on campus and just found the world open to me. And so things that I was involved with, I'm a big believer in the school motto of the mind, body, and spirit. So obviously took advantages of what I could from the academic standpoints. Got a great advisor, Tim Holly, who's still here today. And when I finally did the math a few years ago when Carter was getting ready to enter the upper school. I think I realized he was only 27 when he became my advisor. And now here I am, 47 years old, and you think through some of those things, and hopefully I get to talk some more about that. But I also got involved. I played a number of different sports. Never really excelled at any of them, but enjoyed the camaraderie and the teamship. And then I also got involved in a lot of student activities, which I know Carter's been really strong with here as well. In particular, student government. Gilman was a part of a both city and statewide student government organization. And I got very involved with those. One was the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, which I think I held 2 positions on. And then the other was it was called the Maryland Association of Student Councils, which I became my senior year, the president of all of the non-public schools in the state of Maryland. So got involved in a lot of things here.
Was government something that you were interested in maybe getting involved with after graduating from Gilman in college? Because I know you studied public policy in college, and you were involved with a lot of government organizations in high school. Was government something that you were looking to pursue down the line?
Yeah, so in the Gilman yearbook, they do a write-up, or they used to do, of the 25th reunion and where everyone would be in the 25th reunion. And so I got to look back at it a few years ago, and it said that I was going to be president of the United States. And I was really interested in politics when I was younger. So while at Gilman, I was actually a page in the U.S. Senate. I was appointed by Robert Dole, former minority leader of the Senate from Kansas, and had some just unbelievable experiences as a Senate page. And one that Carter's heard me tell a lot about is I happened to be right off the Senate floor on, I think it's August the 2nd, 1990, which is when Iraq invaded Kuwait. And there was we had these wire services. This is pre-internet. These wire services, the UPI and AP wires that would go, and you'd cut off the wire when they got long enough and hang them on the wall. And I just happened to be there as that news story was typing out. So I really fell in love with politics. Took a semester off of college, worked for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and then also for a senator from North Carolina for 2 summers. And when I was graduating from W&L, I did think that I was going to get into politics. And I thought, well, why not do something first before I go down to the hill for the rest of my life? And I became a history and government teacher at a private school down in South Carolina. And will fully admit my government class was completely plagiarized from my 9th grade Jerry Thornberry U.S. government class, and he knew it. So I had his permission. Literally taught the same books that he taught. But life took me in another direction, and I didn't follow a further path into politics. Got into real estate development and construction, but it was a passion of mine when I was younger.
I definitely want to get to real estate and construction and talk to you a little bit about that, but I'm interested because Carter was in my leadership and literature class this fall, and he's mentioned to me that you taught for a little bit in South Carolina, and I'm curious about that year teaching Jerry Thornberry's syllabus and maybe how you got involved in teaching for that year and what that was like for you.
Sure. Well, a little bit of it goes back to Gilman in a way that will make sense. So in 1990, I was entering my senior year, and this invasion had occurred. And for my class, we kind of all realized we were turning 18, and this was the first major conflict that had occurred, obviously in our lifetime, and for beyond that. And there was discussion in our senior room. Is the draft going to come back? So I was voted class conservative in my class, And the class socialist was a great guy named A.J. Julius, whose father, Peter Julius, was on the history faculty here for a long time, my fresh soft football coach. And A.J. posed the question to our class, service to your country doesn't just have to be military. Service to your country can also be things like teaching. And so when I was coming to the end of my college career and trying to decide, maybe I'm not going to do politics, I thought about maybe the military as an option. And I had a member of my wrestling team at W&L who was Canadian, and he was in the Marines in order to get his U.S. citizenship. And he told me that I probably was not made out to be in the military. So I said, wow, I can remember A.J. Julius saying, well, you can do service for your country by being a teacher. So I went into the library at college and just got a list of schools on the East Coast and just started sending out letters. And eventually there was a head of an upper school at this school in South Carolina who had been a W&L alum, and they had an opening in the history department, which is not very often in secondary schools that you find openings in history departments. So I got lucky, and I went down for a year, and I taught 7th, 11th, and 12th grade history and government. So I taught South Carolina history. My mother's family is from Charleston, South Carolina, so it wasn't a far stretch. I taught 11th grade U.S. history and then a 12th grade government class. And I loved every moment of being with the students, which I'm sure is something that you've, a passion that you've found as well. And I'm still in touch with a couple of my students through social media, which has been really, really awesome.
That's pretty cool. And I know how difficult it is to come into the classroom. Like, you just graduated from college and you were teaching 11th and 12th grade. And it's definitely not easy, even if you have this built out syllabus and, you had some mentorship maybe, but you're so close in age that it's a little challenging, especially that first year, I'd say.
So Jake, it was even harder. I had nothing. I had no built-in syllabus. I mean, it's not like I went to Dr. Thornberry and said, can you please hand me everything? I just still had my books from his class that I'd taken freshman year. So I kind of built it around what we had done my freshman year. And then, going into a classroom of 17 and 18-year-olds, it was tough. But it was another Gilman teacher who I kind of put myself in the mindset of, which was just another master teacher. His name was Nick Schloter. Carter actually had his son as his 5th grade teacher here at Gilman. And Mr. Schloter was just a no-nonsense guy. And you just instantly respected the man. And I just put myself in the mindset of, how am I going to earn their respect and really prove myself that I'm going to give them something that's valuable. Now, it was crazy. The very first paper that my U.S. history class did, and I did history a little bit different than traditionally. I felt that my students really probably didn't have an understanding of what is going on in the modern world. So we started from Sputnik and came forward. And so our first term paper, which was late September, early October, was on Vietnam, which were subjects that I never even got to in U.S. history. So I'm happy that I did it that way. And then we went all the way back to Native Americans. But I tried to explain to this class like how to do a bibliography and what's going to be expected when you reach college, because these were kids who were applying. And they literally told me that I had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like, wait a second, I just finished 4 months ago. It's like, I know what you need to have in college. So it was interesting, having those kids. I think I enjoyed my 7th graders a little bit more because of something, and this is a gentleman, if you could ever get on this podcast, Bill Green was a longtime teacher administrator here who, when we did our history reports on famous Americans we took U.S. history, I think in 11th grade here. I did my report on Mr. Green. And when he was getting close to retirement, I asked him, what do you plan to do? You've got all these advanced degrees. Are you going to teach it was Stevenson at that time was called Village Julie. He goes, no, I don't want to teach college students. I go, oh, were you going to teach some AP classes in the upper school? He goes, no, I'm not going to teach in the upper school. I go, well, how are you going to end your career? He goes, I want to end my career as a middle school teacher. And it's like, whoa, I was a horrible person. I was a terrible human being in middle school. Why would you want to do that? And he goes, look, the kids in middle school are smart enough that they can understand complex ideas, but don't pretend like they know it all already. Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed my 7th graders. My mother had been a middle school math teacher also. I really enjoyed those 7th grade kids. And probably follow them from afar more than I follow some of the kids who are my juniors and seniors. But it was a really good experience, and I'm really happy that I did it.
Yeah, that's something that I have thought about before too. Teaching middle school is something that I wasn't interested in at all. I was like, I don't want to teach middle school kids. Like, they're crazy, they're running around, they're probably not going to listen. But I've observed some of the classes here at Gilman, the middle school classes, and it's amazing because I would say I agree completely with what you said. They're engaged and they can understand these ideas just from my observing, and they're smart. They have ideas of their own that are pretty fresh, and even in my observations, I've learned a lot from the middle school. So I think that's a misconception on my part too. At some points, is middle school would be, and they have so much energy too, those middle school guys.
I agree. And one of my classmates, Donnell Thompson, is a middle school teacher here at Gilman. And I'm jealous. I think if I had gone in strictly as a middle school teacher, I probably would have done it for a little while longer. I don't think I'm the right type of person to have been a lifetime teacher. I don't think that I have the patience that it really takes to be a teacher. But I just think that that's just such a great age if you're an educator. As a parent, as maybe as a child, maybe not the best years, but certainly as an educator and at a place like Gilman where these kids are just so smart. I can remember meeting Carter's 6th grade history teacher, Mr. Jones, Andre Jones, another unbelievable master teacher. And he's just sitting there. It was the beginning of the school year, and he's telling me what he talks about, and he's going to talk about like what's really a national border. And I'm like, whoa, you're going to talk to 6th graders about? That's a really in-depth idea. And he goes, I've been doing this for years. He's like, it's the most interesting conversation you ever had. So I think that if I had a few more middle school classes, I might have stuck it out a little bit longer. But look, getting to be the father of an upper schooler, this kid's 100 times smarter than I ever was, and it's just incredible the conversations that we have. And so I don't know. Maybe if I had a bunch more Carters, maybe I would have enjoyed it a little bit more too.
So Carter, I'm curious, from hearing your dad's story about how he got to do what he's doing right now. And he described his experience in politics in high school and maybe his interest in politics in college a little bit too, teaching. You're now a senior at Gilman. It's been a weird year for sure. But are there certain things that you're really interested in or particularly interested in that you think you might want to pursue in college and try out, like your dad tried out a couple different things in his start to his career?
Yeah. So, I think that kind of my interest heavily reflect my extracurriculars at the school, which we briefly talked about. But I started and run my own investment club at Gilman. So we teach the student body on investments. We're the only investment class in the upper school. So we're pretty proud of that. I'm pretty proud of the work we've done there. And so I think stemming from that, I'm fairly interested in going into to finance as a major, but I don't really see myself on Wall Street or trading with hedge funds, that type of thing. Um, you know, conveniently enough, I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do. As I grow older, and politics is something that has been consistently on my mind. I guess kind of ironically, I might be the politician that he never got around to be, but yeah, it's something that I feel like the more I think about it, the more passionate I am. Sort of like making sure that this country is a better place. I'm a firm believer in wherever you go, you have to leave it as a better place than when you came into it. And hopefully my work at Gilman over a lot of different activities has done that. But yeah, politics is something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I'm interested into talking to you about where your interest in politics maybe originated, but I'm also interested in your finance club here and how you got that idea to start the is it called the finance club?
It's called the Gilman Investment Society.
Gilman Investment Society. All right, so you run that. You're the head of that
Yes.
club. Where did that interest start?
Oh man. So I guess I kind of have to attribute my interest, at least, to my grandmother. Back when I was younger, probably like 9, 10, she would give me stocks as a birthday present instead of a toy. And so I always had a knowledge of like kind of what a stock was. I didn't really know anything about like how they were traded, like what was going on about that, but I knew what it was. And so when I entered 7th grade, there was a quarter elective on investing. And so I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed looking up companies. Granted, I didn't know really anything about how to analyze them or anything like that. I just liked, I think that Hershey's makes good chocolate bars, so I'm gonna buy Hershey. And so I liked it from there. And then we took a tour in between my 8th and 9th grade year, so over the summer at his alma mater, Washington and Lee, and they have a super successful student-run investment portfolio. The students manage, I believe it's around $11 million of the school's endowment. And so they kind of proposed the idea of, why don't you try to start something like that at Gilman? And so when I entered high school, and I immediately saw there was really no further pursuits in, investing that I could take, I thought to myself, it's something that needs to be at the school. And so I might as well be the person to bring it to it.
Wow, that's pretty ambitious as a 9th grader to start a new club with investments that had never before been something that guys could sign up for and participate in here at Gilman. What types of things, when you guys meet as a club, what do you guys do? What do you discuss? How do you recruit guys and let them know that this is an option for them?
Yeah, so we kind of go from the very basics of, what is a stock, what is the stock market, to, now we're up to analyzing financial statements. So we just did a review of income statements and balance sheets, which for those, I guess, listening that don't know what those are, it's one of them, the income statement essentially talks about the company, the money the company made. And the balance sheet kind of goes over what the company owns and what it owes. And so we're going to move on to the last financial statement, which is cash flow. We're going to go into analyzing companies, the process of investing. I think I might want to do my own charting lesson, which is like how you read charts. It's something I've been thinking about doing. We haven't had that in the curriculums over the past years, but it's something that I've become more interested and more knowledgeable about recently. Yeah.
And where do you get all of your knowledge about these ideas or investment information that they aren't taught to you in class? Like, no one is teaching this to you at school. Is this all on your own? And how do you learn more about investments so that you can relay the information to the guys in your club?
Yeah, so I think from a variety of different sources. Over my freshman to sophomore year summer, I met with Mr. Furlong with a group of guys that were going to help me run the club. And he gave us a list of things that, we needed to look into, like books, stuff like that. And so I ended up reading a bunch of these really good books. that like really good introduction books, kind of talking about like, you know, basics of the market, basic like investment principles, concepts. And from that, I ended up watching a ton of Khan Academy videos. And then really the best way that I've been able to learn is just through practical investing, right? So whether that be a mock portfolio or a real one. For my bar mitzvah, my parents gave me a TD Ameritrade account with $1,500 on it. I really didn't touch it up until about May of last year. And so I'm up like, I think since then, I think around 500% on it, making a bunch of nice long-term trades, you know, and that has taught me so much more than just, you know, sitting down and just watching a video of some guy on a screen that was recorded 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal is to, you know, gather as much information as possible and put it in the most digestible form I can, for people that want to come and to the club that day and to listen to and learn, hopefully.
What kind, that's impressive, by the way, but what types of guys do you think might be interested in joining the club? And if you had to recommend what you guys do to the student body, right, how would you pitch to guys that, hey, you should come to this club, it's going to be worth it for you, you're going to learn a lot? How would you maybe pitch your club to people?
Yeah, so basically I would just say money management is something that everyone needs to learn about. I'm a firm believer in that. And unfortunately, you know, America's educational system, and also here at Gilman, you know, we don't do it justice, right? We really don't teach our students enough about things that everyone has to learn about growing up, whether that be taxes or you know, savings. And so I think if anyone's really interested in money management, right? You know, taking something that a small portion of your paycheck and growing it to hopefully at one point another source of revenue, right? That's something that is super cool. It helps build generational wealth, hopefully in the long run, which is, I think, everyone's long-term goal really, is to leave something behind for their kids. And I guess that's very hard to think about as a teenager, right? But it's something that really you can't get started on early enough.
Excellent. Well, I hope some more guys come out to your club, the investment club, and help take over when you go to college next year, so you can leave that behind here at Gilman, and we can see how your work has grown. And it's pretty impressive and a cool thing that you're doing for the school. So I do want to get to maybe talking about some influences on both of you guys in your time at Gilman. We talked a little bit about Coach Holly, your advisor. Talked about some of your teachers that made an impact on you. But when you think back to your time at Gilman, what do the teachers and coaches and faculty and staff here have, and how did they impact you, you know, in your senior year now, but really in your whole time at Gilman? We can maybe start with Carter and go to Jared next.
So I've definitely had some huge influences in my life coming from Gilman. I think two guys I think of off the top of my head were my middle school advisor, Mr. Wallace, and Mr. Jones, who was my 6th grade history teacher that he just mentioned. I mean, both incredible people, genuinely inspired me to want to learn more. And I think that's really the best thing a teacher can do, is right, to inspire their students to learn more outside of the classroom. And you know, the demeanor that they presented themselves in and taught the class always made it super interesting. Mr. Wallace, as an advisor, was a great mentor, a great person to look up to. You know, he does a lot of really cool things. He's someone that I think you should have on the podcast. He does he's this Wally GPX thing. Where
I just heard about that.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
He makes art by riding his bicycle around Baltimore City, which is super cool.
On the app, right? Because you track yourself, and he does designs with his bike rides. Is that?
Yeah. So he draws them out with a pencil, and then he'll hit record on some app and then actually bike the entire thing, and it comes out with some art piece, which is really cool.
Yeah, very unique.
Yeah, really unique. And I think that that kind of idea of maybe innovation or doing something that hasn't really been done before is I would attribute as an inspiring source for me. Kind of like going into upper school, um, specifically with my investment club, but then also some other extracurriculars that I'm president of. I'd say in the upper school, Mr. Schmick has been just such a great, I guess, guide, and just someone that is genuinely nice to talk to. He is really the person that runs clubs as like a faculty person for the school, and so I've worked with him a lot there. I also took his English class in ninth grade, and so he's a great guy, and he's definitely been inspiring to me. And so I think that the more teachers that I have here, the more people that I look up to, right? My memory of Gilman, even presently, grows a lot stronger in how much I appreciate so much that it's done for me.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm sure that appreciation is even stronger this year since it's not a typical year. We're not in the classroom. I know I've really missed, especially recently, just being in the room with students and the other faculty members and teachers here and learning from them like you spoke about. Jared, any names or advisors or people who, and I'm sure there are a ton, there's a long list, but any specific attributes of the teachers here at Gilman that rubbed off on you maybe in your time?
Can I tell a John Schmick story first?
For sure.
So Carter's John Schmick was in the lower school when I was in the upper school, and his father was dean of students. And John had a classmate whose older brother was in my class, and we used to have a really nice senior room. And that senior room, the windows looked out to where sort of the statuary garden is now off the first floor. Coming out of the upper school, I think it's now. You had music and art history, and I think Mr. Christian had. So that was one big room. That was our senior room. And one day, John Schmick and his friend try to sneak into the senior room. Now, I don't know how it is here today, but in my day, you didn't go in the senior room unless you were a senior. And so they tried sneaking in, and I got the older Mr. Schmick used to be famous. He'd have these Post-it notes that he would put into your box, and it was either a see me or see me fast. And you knew if you were in trouble, it was a see me fast Post-it note. Everything was okay if it was a see me. So next day I get a see me note. I'm going to myself, oh man, I'm probably in trouble because I ran his son off out of the senior room. And I go in to see him, and he goes, look, I know the way these things work at the senior room. I'm a graduate here of Gilman. I know younger kids aren't supposed to be going in there. And I don't want my son thinking that he can get away with things just because dad's the dean of students. So look, if you gotta discipline him, I'll look the other way. Now, if I knew his John Schmick was going to grow to be 6'6", 250, I may not have chased him out of the senior room. But it was a really cool memory that I had. But as far as teachers who had big influences on me, I mean, it's got to start with our headmaster, Mr. Finney. I mean, you just can't say enough about Mr. Finney. Anything that you have ever heard about him is just 100% true. The man just lived just this mythical life of just goodness and love and everything you ever wanted to be. Mr. Finney was. And he really looked out for me my 4 years here. I can remember the first parents' night. My parents came in from Columbia, and Mr. Finney made a point to come over to my parents to say, look, if it snows and Jared gets stuck, he's welcome to spend the night at our house. And as a 14-year-old boy going, oh no, I'm going to sleep over at the headmaster's house. I mean, I was terrified. But I would say I probably never would have gotten into W&L if it hadn't been for Mr. Finney and him looking out for me and really helping me gain confidence to succeed in everything that I did. There were so many, like I've already mentioned, Doc Thornberry just made me love being a student. Mr. Schloter loved being a student. I loved Bill McLean, who was a math teacher. I had him for 2 years. Just a guy who enjoyed being a teacher and being part of students' lives. I had Ian Brooks his very first year here. There's the same thing. Just graduated from Hopkins, teaches our sophomore geometry class, right? So I'm almost embarrassed if I leave somebody out. So I don't want to go on and on. But the lessons that I think that Gilman taught me really was something that they fortified or enhanced from what my parents taught me, which was you need to go through life. You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal. And when you write that you did something on your honor, that's the most important thing that you can do in life. And I've tried very hard to live my life that way. If I give my word to somebody that I'm going to do something, my wife's an attorney. She's probably the only reason that I write contracts with people. I'd much rather shake hands and come to an agreement. But that was definitely, it was something my parents thought was very important, and Gilman really helped strengthen that resolve. That's just the way that you need to live your life.
Love it. And when you talk about Mr. Finney, we had Del Dressel. He came on the latest podcast, and he told a couple stories about Mr. Finney. One of them that sticks out to me, and in addition to him just embodying what you're talking about of integrity and honesty and really the Gilman Five, but one of the stories that Del told on the last episode was whenever he spoke and people were talking, everyone just quieted down, and there was just total respect for the man. And I'm sure that was the case the whole time you went through Gilman when Mr. Finney was the headmaster, was just total respect for him.
Oh, and he earned every bit of it. Again, the stories, he had 1 or 2 suits that he wore. I always remember the gray, plaid one. And the stories are true. His pockets would be full of trash because when he walked around, he saw trash, he picked it up. And so when you saw, and it's something that I've brought into business, a little bit of that same philosophy is you never ask someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. And there is nothing, Mr. Finney would change out a hot water heater just as much as he'd step into the classroom to substitute for a teacher. There is nothing that guy wouldn't do. And I don't know if you know the story of, at Princeton, he was considered one of the greatest, offensive linemen that Princeton ever had. And Princeton's only ever Heisman Award winner was the quarterback that he protected. And so back then, the blue-gray all-star game was forever the epitome of if you made it in college football, your invitation to that. And he turned down his invitation to the blue-gray all-star game because he said he was behind on his senior thesis at Princeton. And that was something that was more important for him to work on. And he's just a warm, loving person. And so he earned everybody's respect. And yeah, when he spoke, you listened because you also knew anything that he was saying to you, it was for your benefit. There was nothing for his benefit. He was only out there looking out for his students. So just a great human. And I'm very sad he passed on my birthday, actually. So I'm very sad that he's not around in the world anymore. But I can tell you, even years after I graduated from Gilman, he still knew my name, still recognized me by sight. And I think that there's just countless young men who benefited from having him as a part of their life.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing, the stories about him. I'm also pretty interested in your fascination with history. It sounds like history was something that you were always somewhat into in high school, and government and politics. Where did that start? And then I want to get to Carter because you also have a similar interest, it sounds like, in politics and history.
So the history really, I just find it so interesting that people did things before us so well. And what I mean by that is, take the example. Today, I got an email from a friend who's a state delegate down in Maryland, and she had a bill that she wanted me to look over. And it's like 80 some pages long, right? Just one single bill, really not of earth shattering importance. And yet 250 years ago, a group of men wrote, what do we, constitutions, 5 pages, 6, depends on the spacing and the size of the font, this structure that still today is the structure of our whole society here in America. And you can keep going back and just, so we can go to Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychiatry. But if you go back to the early philosophers, I mean, they were still answering those same questions. So my interest in history is just my fascination of learning how these other people, and just trying in some way to wish that I could have been a fly in the room to hear what was said. I love Carter's mom. My wife loves the play Hamilton. And there's the one song, no one knows what happened in the room that day when it was Hamilton sat down with the governors of Maryland, Virginia to create the District of Columbia. And, I just wonder, what were these conversations like Da Vinci when he was, sketching these things out? Like, what was going on in his head? And so I'm thankful for modern technology. Like, this will be recorded. This will sit forever, right? I mean, it would have just been so cool to have been able. So that's my interest in history and politics, is more of like, how did they do it? And now how do we kind of copy the same thing? So
I'm going to throw a quick question at you, because this is a question that I use for icebreakers in classes sometimes, and it's a hard question to answer. But if you were, and you could do the podcast one too, if you're doing a podcast, who would you have on? But if you were having dinner with 2-3 people from American history, maybe we could stick with American history, who do you think you'd want to talk to, pick their brains a little bit?
Wow, what a great question, and that's a tough one to put me on the spot with.
It is.
I think, especially with what's going on in the world right now, and something that Carter and I have a particular interest in, I think being able to talk to Martin Luther King Jr. would be fascinating to hear how he was able to organize and overcome and at least start things moving in the right direction. I mean, we still have so much that we need to do in America to make it a better place. But I certainly, he's certainly one that I would want to talk to. I feel like I should take one from different pieces of history. I would want to talk to James K. Polk, former president. And the reason is, when Carter, was it first grade?
First grade, yeah.
When they did the presidential parade, Carter was James K. Polk.
So and you guys learned a lot about him.
Convinced me, yes. Greatest president ever in the history of...
Well, he's in the top rankings when they come out with the rankings of the best presidents. Yeah. He's up there. He's like 6 or 7 maybe, right?
I don't know about ranking specifically, but what he did in just a 4-year term is incredibly impressive. His expansion of the country, right? He ran on this idea of manifest destiny. And I think under his 4-year presidency, U.S. obtained land that ended up being, I think, 13 states. And he only ran for 4 years. He's the only president in American history that said, I will only be president for 1 term. which I think is fascinating.
Hmm.
And there's a Gilman connection actually with James Polk. So the upper school is Carey Hall, named after William Polk Carey. So the Polks and Careys are direct lineage.
Oh, wow.
So there is a little connection. In fact, Bill Carey used to carry a James Polk coin evidently in his pocket. And I didn't get to see him after Carter had been Polk. I would have asked to have seen the coin. But there is a little bit of a connection there.
That's pretty cool. I did not know that. The president's speeches thing that they do in first grade or the lower school is something that I think is really cool. That happened this week actually, and I don't know, because you learn a lot about these figures, and
Yeah.
I've always been really into the presidents. Like I knew like presidential history and naming all the presidents in order when I was a little kid, and I think James Polk is a president who he doesn't get much press, but he really was one of the best, people say.
Yeah.
In the rankings.
And can I say, so Carter's, I think you did another paper about him, maybe in second grade from Miss Ferretti.
Did I?
And she has kept that paper, like every year or two, his second grade teacher gets in contact with this Jeannie Ferretti, who's, I think every one of Carter's teachers were the best ever. So just, so I keep saying, I loved Miss Ferretti also. And she kept, I remember maybe the last time she told us was maybe when you were in 9th or 10th grade, she had kept this paper that he had done on James K. Polk in second grade. So it's definitely something that stuck with him for
I mean,
a while.
it's impressive that you were given James Polk for the presidential speeches in first grade, and then you wrote papers on him in second grade. Now you're a senior and you're still spitting out facts about the manifest destiny.
I wrote a whole paragraph as part of a history paper last year on him. So still think that he's a great president. If I had to pick a couple of guys to sit down with from American history, easily top of my list.
Excellent.
So next time you think Dad doesn't listen to you, now we've got proof forever.
Fair
I
enough.
do listen.
So Carter, where did your interest in politics and these type of historical facts, did it start in first grade, or has it been something that you've developed over your years at Gilman?
Yeah, so I can't really say specifically when. If I had to guess, it probably would have been around the 2016 election. Obviously, that was a very controversial one for an assortment, a variety of different reasons. But I think kind of from there, it kind of inspired me to learn a lot more about, policies, issues. So if I would actually talk to people about things, I would be a little more educated on them rather than just say like, I like this color of the party or I like this party, which I personally find completely ridiculous. That there's a party system that people root for like teams, right? Like sports teams. That's so if I were to get into politics, I guess the reason I kind of am interested in getting into politics is to sort of modernize our government. I think that it really hasn't since been like updated to a point that it can properly be run at with the times since FDR, who is another person that I would very much want to sit down and have a conversation with, because his policies that he implemented are still incredibly important to this day. The government agencies he's created. I think that there needs to be, at least for how the government's run, a new sort of like update, if that makes sense. I think about it a little bit from a tech term. So I do like tech for the school, would that be AV, or I work for the tech office. And so I'm thinking about how, we have this phone, like this thing that everything's running off of, and we haven't updated it for like 90 years now. Like it's not going to be as productive as it could be. And I think that starts with getting some more young people into office personally.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with that. And even though your dad was talking about how it's amazing that we're still holding on from this document that was written, 250 years ago, I think maybe what you're saying is true also. It's like, it's amazing and it's incredible that these men sat down and crafted this thing that still preserves us today, but it's also maybe there are a few things that need to be updated to the times. So
Yeah, I mean the Constitution, in itself was a little bit of an update off of the Articles of Confederation, which was our first attempt at a government and failed miserably, right? So I think that the founding fathers had an idea, right, of this is what our country needs right now, but it obviously needs to grow and expand. And I just think that for whatever reason, we've kind of fallen a little behind on that over the past 50 years, and I think it's time for regardless of policy or political ideology, to kind of step in and say it's time for things to be reorganized, is what I would have to say.
Yeah, rethought out maybe.
Yeah.
I like that. Maybe you're the guy to do it. Who knows? I do want to ask you, Jared, a little bit about your current profession, what you do now, and how you got into real estate and construction, and maybe a few stories of how you manifested your destiny, to put it into James Polk terms.
Oh, yeah. Sure. So when I decided teaching was going to be a one and done option, I thought about, well, I thought I was going to come back and work on Capitol Hill. And my father had a client that was creating a big development out in Columbia, or in Howard County. And he said, why don't you go meet with him and maybe try that one out for a year, and you'll be 23. You're ready to go to Capitol Hill at 23. There's nothing, nothing in your way. And so I called down to DC and said, I know I asked you for a job when I graduated, and I asked but can I just delay one more year? And they said no problem. And so I went to work in real estate development in Howard County, and we were working on this big planned community. Not as big as Columbia. Columbia's 14,000 acres. And the project we were working on is called Waverly Woods, a little over 600 acres. And one of the investors in the project is a guy named Bruce Taylor, who's valedictorian Gilman class of 68 with Mr. Schmick, and Sherm Bristow, who was my freshman English teacher, as well as being the athletic director. And he has had two sons who have both graduated from Gilman, Ross and Marty. And I just fell in love with the whole taking this sort of raw piece of land and building a community. And just a few years into it, I was 25. I was getting married to my college sweetheart, and I went in to ask for a raise. And the guy who was my boss said, you know what, I think you're going to do much better as a partner with me in something than as an employee. He said, so why don't you, if you want to start some sort of real estate company, I'll be your silent partner and we'll see how it goes. So I started two companies. One was called First Real Estate Management, which manages homeowners associations and condominium associations. And I ran that company on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then the other hours, I had a company we started called Old Town Construction, which started off doing historic renovation work in Ellicott City, and then evolved one day the partnership that owned Waverly Woods, which is, we're almost in our 27th year of development now, and we're just in the last couple parcels. But this was early on, and I was at one of their meetings, and really my job was to bring the bagels. I went to the bagel shop, made sure that there were bagels and cream cheese for the meetings, and they came to a part in the development where they had to do moderate income housing, and they looked around the table, and these were three men who had done just incredible development projects. I mean, one of the families, if you go down to University of Maryland Hospitals, the Homer Godelski wing of the hospital. So we had the Godelski family who had done Tyson's Corner Mall and Wheaton Plaza and all these incredible developments, and we had the Taylors who had done a ton of work in Ellicott City around there.
psychiatric hospital that they owned. And then another guy, Kennard Warfield, who had longtime farmer from a very prestigious Warfield family. His great-great-great-grandfather had been an early governor of Maryland. And none of them had ever done moderate income housing. And so they just looked around the table, and I'm taking some notes and making sure that there's enough bagels for everybody. And they go, Jared, we're going to put you in charge of this project. And it ended up being it's the very first LEED, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, privately constructed building in the state of Maryland. And it was a 102-unit senior apartment building. And I started the building right around when Carter was born. So I just turned 29, finished it right around the time his brother was born. So I was almost 33. And I had never built anything like this in the state of Maryland, had never seen a green apartment building, especially one that was done for people of moderate income. And so at 33, Governor Ehrlich, another Gilman grad, he probably doesn't know that he did this, but I was named Developer of the Year by the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, and did another project a few years later. I think I'm the only person to be named it twice. And so this idea of environmentally friendly construction just totally caught everything that I was looking for. It was new, it was innovative, nobody had done it before, and it was something that I had to think through everything in the process. There was no blueprint of how this had been done. No one had done this stuff before. And I always, when I've given lectures about green housing and environmentally friendly housing, we have these trade magazines. And when I first started, the trade magazines would have like maybe 2-3 pages about these environmentally friendly features. And now half of the publication is it. So I primarily build multifamily housing. All of it is environmentally friendly for a multitude of reasons. I just think it's economically better for everybody, and I think it's the right thing to do. And I think in the long run, it costs less to do environmentally friendly. Gosh, we build a couple hundred units each year. Carter and his brother are investors in a couple of them. It's just something that has fed into every passion I would ever have. So I'm still involved in politics, right? We still have to go in front of a planning board and zoning boards and get text amendments and building code modifications. So there's still wonderful interaction with politics, and it really circles back then to something that was very fundamental in my upbringing, which was where I grew up. I think shaped me and who I am as much as anything else or anybody else did. So
when you were given this responsibility at such a young age to do something that no one else had done before in terms of the green real estate, how did you educate yourself and figure out if the pages in the book where there are only 2 pages, right? How did you figure out how to make this happen? It seems like the huge responsibility, and you were young. And
yeah. So it started, I mean, that was not the first thing that I ever built. I had already started the construction company, and I had built a couple of commercial buildings at that point, done some single family homes. And when I did my very first commercial building, there's a long story that goes to it, but basically by default, I ended up having to be the general contractor. And so I showed up on the job site every day with 24 donuts. And if it was the guy digging the footers or the guy framing a wall, I got donuts, I got questions, and I just had no fear of asking. And I had no fear of saying, what are you doing and why are you doing it? And so when you start off with your hypothesis, right, from early, and you try to go through these different subsects of how you can accomplish different things, you finally get to your conclusion. And so what I enjoy most, and this very much ties back to the history with green building, to me, green building is really bringing the buildings back to before we had all of these modern conveniences of electricity and heating and cooling, right? I mean, we want to use passive solar energy and passive ventilation, right? So there's my study of history. Well, how did they build houses before running water, or before, okay, well, they collected it in cisterns. And so, you go back and you try to see how people did it before. And they had to be much more efficient back then, as opposed to in the 70s when oil was cheap and you have single pane windows everywhere. Okay, well, someone came up with this idea of double pane windows, or putting insulation into walls, and how did they come up with the insulation? Well, they used whatever they had. So back then they might have used newspaper. Wow, someone came up with this idea of you can tear up old blue jeans and put them into walls rather than throwing them into a landfill, right? So it just sparked every interest. And I love the fact that development and construction, at least what I do, there is no repetition. Every project is new. Every project has different situations, something to overcome. And I just love that thought process. And it just always keeps me on my toes.
Every day's different. Different problems arise, and you're constantly trying to work out how to overcome.
So my teachers here at Gilman wouldn't say problems; they say opportunities.
Opportunities,
right?
Yep.
So opportunities arise every day. And look, I've also been very fortunate since the age of 25 to work for myself.
Yeah.
We have 20 employees, and gosh, I think the company had revenue of like $60 million last year, which we're really proud of. And I also have to give a lot of credit to some of my interest in the green construction to my wife. My wife started the Habitat for Humanity chapter at our college. And so she's always been much more socially conscious than I have been. And I can remember us driving around somewhere, and she goes, the difference between you and me, you look at a piece of land and think how many houses can go on there, and I think about what a beautiful parkland it would be. So I had to find something in the middle so that the two, so we wouldn't be in conflict all of the time. But this career has given me wonderful opportunities to meet interesting people. I still go to the job sites. I still love talking to all the people. And it's also given me a tremendous amount of freedom to get to be a part of Carter and his younger brother Mason's life, which I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. I mean, to get to come to his first grade presidential speech to now his chance to be on the path to follow. I mean, it's just, I just can't tell you how awesome it is. And so I'm very thankful that my career has given me, these opportunities.
Awesome. One question for you. So Carter now is going to be graduating, leaving home, leaving the nest, going off to college. And my mom gave me some good advice at this time, actually when I graduated college. But what are maybe one or two pieces of advice, having such a successful career yourself and, being who you are? Is there anything that you would tell Carter before he goes off into the next chapter? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, so one of them, I think Carter's heard me say, my dad gave me one that relates here to Gilman. So 2 bits of advice. One is graduation day, take a look around the room, and half those guys you're never going to see again. And it's sad. But on the other hand, when you do see one of those guys again, this experience that you've had at Gilman will instantly reunite you. And Carter knows I have a classmate I spoke to last week, had not spoken to since graduation day. And hour later, we're still sitting there laughing, talking about this and that situation and this that happened our sophomore year. And I mean, it's just, you've really had your first experience
of being, I don't want to say fraternity, in a brotherhood. And, you know, these guys that you've been with, especially since you've been here 12 years, they'll be with you for a long time. And it really is a very special place in that way. I know my father, you know, his boys' Latin classmates, my father passed almost 2 years ago, and his group of classmates, guys are in his year, they have a lunch once a month. And even before he passed, they named it the Spahn lunch. And they had shirts made up. Of course, it's buttoned down Oxfords because of their age, and it has Spahn on the cuff. They all had Spahn on the cuff. So it's really, you know, these friendships that you're going to keep for a long time. But I think the most important advice that I'd give to Carter is not to rush. That there's plenty of time ahead of you. And, you know, Carter and I had this, I spoke to him back in September, like, this is your last year that mom and dad are going to make you lunch and dinner every day and do your laundry, and the dog's going to jump on your bed. I mean, look at Mr. Scott. Now he's got to go to the grocery store himself. You know, he's got to, I heard on one of the podcasts, you know, you're sharing the Netflix account with your sister because you don't want to spend the $9.99 a month, right? There's, fortunately for Carter, he comes from a family with some pretty good genetics. He's going to live a long life. And so don't rush. Just take your time and enjoy all of it as it comes to you. I think those are the two bits of advice.
Love it. Love it. Comes right back to our meditation conversation at the beginning. Just no rush. Yeah. Right? I think that's great. Do want to talk about your guys' books that you brought in, right? Carter, you have a couple books there that...
We do. I got a special one for us here.
Awesome.
This is my go-to book. It's the Giving Tree. For whenever anyone asks me of a book that has left an impact on you, specifically because it's an easy answer, but also because it genuinely has. I think that the story of to complicatedly explain a child's story. The story of a tree that gives everything to this kid, and the kid keeps asking for more and more, and it no matter what it is, like, the tree will do its best to give it what it has, and I think that there's a couple morals in it, specifically not taking advantage of a relationship. Specifically, you don't know, like, what's super important to you until the tree had nothing else more to give. That type of thing. It's something that has definitely left an impact on me. It's something that if anyone ever asks me about a book they should reread, I kind of jokingly but also kind of seriously talk about this book. I originally didn't like it, actually. Because the person on the back, I don't know if the camera can see its face, it used to scare me as a child. I don't know if you remember that. It was like a genuinely, like, this is not the face of someone you want around your children. So, I mean, like whose decision was it to put this on the back of the book? But yeah, I think now that he doesn't look like a scary monster to me, it's something that I go back to frequently.
Yeah, how about a smile there, Shel?
Yeah,
come on.
You want to show that? He's not even smiling. He's just kind of like
snarling.
He's like,
yeah. But it is a very profound, deep book, especially for, I think a lot of children's books are, but that one in particular is the message is clear, and it's can see why you chose that. So that's a great pick. Giving Tree. What else do we have here?
So I've got two books. So one is the biography of Jim Rouse. And Jim Rouse is just this incredible developer who's from right around here, right around campus. His kids went to school here. In fact, one of his grandsons, Jimbo Norton, grew up around the corner from me in Columbia. And when I came to visit the school, Jimbo hosted me for the day. And I remember when the decision came, Jimbo was the only person I knew at Gilman, because I had just found out the name of the school. I mean, again, didn't know it existed. And I was so excited. I was like, well, I'll know Jimbo, and he'll be a sophomore, and I'll be a freshman, and he'll look out for me. And then in August, Jimbo came over to the house, and he said, I decided not to go back to Gilman. And so my first day of summer workouts, my dad dropped me off at the corner of Roland and Northern and said, the gym's over there. And that was like, I walked on campus knowing nobody, but Jim Rouse created this community of Columbia, Maryland, where I hadn't read the book in a couple years, and I flipped open just by chance to the exact page that I love reading about, which was his whole philosophy of trying to develop a community based around love. And how do we make it so that people of all different races, religions, socioeconomic backgrounds all live as one. And that was his whole philosophy around the creation of Columbia. And so now, years later, that I lived in that community. In fact, I was the 8th baby born at that Howard County General Hospital. My parents were one of the first 1,000 families to move into Columbia. As a developer now, I just take such inspiration from everything that he did, and just what a beautiful place to have grown up. I'm very lucky to have grown up there. And then the other one that I brought was a yearbook from when I studied abroad for a year. I was very fortunate to go away my entire junior year of college to London, England. And growing up, my mother was a school teacher, my father was an attorney, and they would spend anything that I ever needed for education. There was no bank account. It was open check. Everything else was, lived on well within our means. So, we lived in a very modest middle-class home. Our trips were to Ocean City, Maryland, or to go see family, somewhere. So when my parents gave me the opportunity to go abroad for a year, it was my my second time ever being overseas. I went as a junior at Gilman. I got to go to Israel for a week with a couple of my Gilman classmates. But to spend an entire year in a foreign country and to really see just how big the world is. And, here I'm a junior coming from a little town in Virginia, Lexington, Virginia, where Washington Lee was, and I'm in class with a kid from somewhere in Berlin, Germany, who's just finished his mandatory military service, or I'm in class with a student from the UAE, and just to get to see how broad and beautiful the world is. That was really a wonderful opportunity for me. So my yearbook from my year abroad.
Awesome. Sounds like a great experience traveling. I mean, that's one thing that I would tend to agree with. If you can do it, I mean, you learn a ton about the world.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. While Carter and his brother have been school age, we did two things. Once Carter turned 11, right, every year for his birthday, rather than a birthday party, he picked a city in America to travel to. And then starting in 3rd or 4th grade is when we started going abroad, I guess to Jamaica.
So I was like first.
Yeah, so we would do a winter trip that would be an educational trip. Like we would go somewhere in Europe, and as much as, Carter and Mason hated getting up at 7 a.m. so we could catch, the bus to this tour. I mean, it was, we got to travel all over Europe, and it was, Carter's seen things in museums that I wish, I had seen as a child, and it was awesome to see, like when we first saw Monet's water lilies, for him to go and his brother go and go like, oh wow, we've studied this before, and now they see it in person, and all of those cool things. So we've always done a winter trip that's been, some sort of historical tour of a European city. And then our spring breaks have usually been to warm weather, but also service, some sort of service day. So we did Jamaica for a number of years, and we spent our first couple years, we'd volunteer at an elementary school. We bring in school supplies that were donated from local schools. And then I think the most fun ones were the last couple years of Jamaica. Carter and his brother and other friends, they volunteered at an orphanage, and they would go and collect all these tennis clothes and tennis rackets and everything, and we bring them to an orphanage in Jamaica, and Carter out there playing barefoot tennis with all the other kids. And they've traveled. We've gotten a chance to travel a lot, see a lot of the world. And I think, give a lot of credit to Carter's mom, Francie, for doing it the right way. Really
sounds like it. Yeah. The educational part is huge. And that's one thing about the trips here at Gilman. I was supposed to go with Coach Hudson. Kevin Hudson does a trip to Europe over the summer with some Gilman guys. I think it's 2 weeks maybe, but he has the whole thing planned out with this similar, like 7 a.m. bus ride, all educational. We learn all about it before we go. I think that makes the trip, is if you know exactly what you're looking at. If you go and you're just looking, it's cool.
Yeah.
But if you know the history, that's the best part. I think
Carter really got to know the culinary of each city more than anything else. Yeah. He was very experimental in trying out all the different foods.
So Carter, maybe last question here before we wrap up the episode. When you look back on your experience at Gilman, and you got a couple more months left here in school, and then you're going to be moving on. It goes fast, I would say. I completely agree with your dad's advice. Don't rush. What do you think you're going to miss the most about Gilman?
Oh man. I mean,
not the 8 a.m. classes.
No, not the 8 a.m.
college.
Classes.
He's definitely scheduling afternoon classes.
The 8 a.m. Zooms.
Oh God. Yeah, definitely not those. I would say probably the opportunities and the people that I've been able to meet coming out of Gilman, and throughout my time here. I think that Gilman has a really amazing and extensive alumni network, and I've definitely met, and maybe in the future have the chance to meet so many incredible people, just because of the relationship with the school, and so, that sense of, longevity in the community, I think speaks volumes to the bond that is created, spending time at this place. And so I think that's what I'll miss the most.
Yeah, the bonds for sure. Exactly what your dad said earlier is that you might not see some of the guys you graduate for a bunch of years, but when you do, it's like you're picking right back up where you left off. So looking forward to seeing you when you come back and keeping in touch with you and your dad. And I really appreciate you guys coming on today. It was a lot of fun, and we touched on some awesome conversational topics here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it because, this recording, unlike if I had had this conversation with my father, I mean, this is going to be in the stratosphere forever, right? So I was telling Carter when we were coming over, I was so excited that you invited us to do this because it's a memory that he and I are going to get to share forever and ever. So I appreciate you having us on. I appreciate you letting me come on. That was really awesome of you, because I know this was your path to follow episode. But Jake, thank you, for having us, and I hope you continue this. I've really enjoyed getting to know the people that you've interviewed. I hope one of these days they get to turn it around and you get to be the interviewee, so we can learn a little bit more about you. But this has been really, really memorable, and thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know we both really appreciate it. So
absolutely, it's a relic. It will be in the files of history here at Gilman. So thank you guys very much, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.